Hello, everyone. I would like to ask the people that are up there if you are able, can you please come down and also join us here? Because otherwise, yeah, we still have some empty chairs here, and it's a bit sad if you're up there and we cannot connect with you, because today is also a dialogue with you, the audience. It's not just about the people that are here on stage. Thank you so much. So again, welcome at the Footprints Conference Change of the Century. Footprints is a collaborative project that aims at reforming the music sector and introducing the values of social, economical, and environmental responsibilities to its activities. The project started back in 2021 with an aim to decarbonize the tours. And as the project is now coming to an end, it is time to draw up that balance together and to discuss where we are now, what we have learned, and how we should move into the future. My name is Hasna Maroudi. I'm a journalist from the Netherlands. I am the co-founder of Lilith magazine, which is a journalistic platform for change. And today and tomorrow, I will be your host. Before we start with the dialogues, I would like to share with you that next to this afternoon, there's also an evening program. Tonight you'll have the chance to enjoy a double concert by Amalia Umeda Quartet and the Thijs Semi Quintet that are both part of the Footprints Tours. And it will start at 8:30. It will be here, so after a quick dinner, please do come back and enjoy the music. About this afternoon, we're going to be listening to a keynote by Hanane Abaydi, after which Pierre Dugelet and Gwendolenn Sharp will tell us a little bit more about Footprints. And then we will start the dialogue, which will be with Parvinder Marwaha, Marguerite Courtel, and Garance Amieux. Unfortunately, Jean Perrissin from Le Cabaret Vert couldn't make it because of strikes in France, so he's not here with us today, but Garance has so kindly said that she could fill in, so thank you so much. As I said, there will be plenty of room also for questions from the audience. So if you have any questions, if you have any thoughts, please do raise your hand and I will make sure that I will get to you with the microphone. And also please wait for the microphone because there are cameras here and otherwise other people that aren't live with us here cannot hear you. So then it is now time to listen to our first keynote speaker. We have invited Hanane Abaydi, who is a corporate activist and a social entrepreneur, to join us today and give us a more intersectional perspective on climate change. Who do Sustainable Development Goals really serve? Please give it up for Hanane Abaydi.
Thank you very much, Hasna. And thank you for having me here on this International Women's Day. Happy International Women's Day to whoever feels supports and embraces womanhood. So challenging the status quo by introducing activist strategies as a strategy for change within organizations is what I do for a living. And I want to start with a disclaimer that activists are very charming people. And no, I don't wear glue or carry a pot of soup. Okay, so don't be afraid, I will not stick myself here to the stage. I have my keynote written down due to a brain fog caused by COVID-19, and I'm still recovering from it, so I hope you bear with me. Welcome in Amsterdam, welcome in the Netherlands. Here in the Netherlands, we have a word that we value and appreciate. It's called gezellig. A word that Dr. Aminata Cairo describes in her book, Holding Space. There is no appropriate definition of this word in English. It could mean cozy or fun. It refers to something pleasant and comfortable. But addressing climate injustice and a lack of intersectionality in the climate debate is far from gezellig, far from pleasant. But it is necessary to have a more pleasant future for the generations to come. So I invite you, or challenge you, while listening to my keynote, to embrace being comfortable with the uncomfortable. The learning zone is in the unknown and in the discomfort. So the question that I will walk you through today is, why is decolonization of the climate debate necessary? And how can the jazz industry challenge the status quo? International Women's Day is an annual reminder that intersectionality is lacking in many debates. The climate debate is one of them. Growing up in the Netherlands as child of expats, also known as immigrants from Morocco, I witnessed on very young age how injustice is entangled in our society and institutionalized in our systems. For instance, healthcare, education, and the economy. People from a lower socioeconomic class and people with a migration background face inequality on 7 dimensions. Deprivation is killing. You will live 6 years shorter and you will have 17 years less of a quality of life. So let it sink in. It's not because on how you live, but your social economic class and your migration background will give you advantages in society or not. While decarbonization is an essential step towards addressing the climate crisis, it can deepen the historically and currently existing injustices of marginalized groups in many ways. We cannot talk about climate change or decarbonizations without addressing injustice caused by imperialism and colonialism, which is why we should use the words climate injustice instead of climate change. To address the problems in a proper way, there is nothing gezellig about climate injustice. This summer, we witnessed the impact of climate change, from wildfires due to high temperatures to coastal and river floods, here in the Netherlands as well. During the last heat wave, we faced, for instance, a severe water shortage and a record drought. Climate change is reaching our backyards and deepening existing socio-economic imbalances. Many international studies show this. Although the most economic vulnerable people are the ones who contribute the least to climate change, they are also the ones who have the least resources to adapt to climate change. Moreover, they benefit the least from climate action. The colonization continues throughout the climate debate, dominated by primarily white privileged people and groups, also according to researchers of Ferdinand in 2019 and Walnerius in 2017. We should understand colonialism as the structure through which one group of people subordinates and exploits another, then justifies this subordination and exploitation by claiming to be the intrinsically superior group. A definition by the correspondent 2019. Decarbonization is an essential step towards addressing the climate crisis. But to address climate injustice, it is important to ensure that the transition is done in a way that centers justice and equity for marginalized groups. This requires taking into account the historical and current injustices that this group have faced and working to address these injustices as part of the transition to a low-carbon economy. Decolonizing the climate debate is necessary for addressing the root causes of the climate crisis and ensuring that solutions are equitable and just for all. Therefore, I would like to highlight in this keynote 4 points. First of all, colonialism and imperialism have historically caused environmental degradations and exploitation of natural resources in colonized countries, leading to climate change. Decolonizing the climate debate means acknowledging the historical and ongoing impact of colonialism on the environment and addressing these issues in a just and equitable way. The second is that the climate crisis affects people differently, depending on their race, ethnicity, socioeconomic status. Decolonizing the climate debate means recognizing and addressing the disproportionate impact of climate change or marginalized groups. and communities, including the indigenous people and people of color. Decolonizing the climate debate also means amplifying the voices of those who have been traditionally excluded from the conversation, including also the indigenous people, the local communities, and the grassroots organizations. This ensures that the solutions to the climate crisis are grounded in local knowledge and community-led initiatives. And the last one is that the mainstream climate debate has often prioritized market-based solutions and technological fixes over systemic change and social justice. We also see a depolitization of the climate debate. The citizens should fix it and should bring in initiatives instead of that the government is handling the systemic change issues. So, in order to decolonize the climate debate, we should challenge the dominant narratives and centering justice and equity in all aspects of the conversations. But before walking through these 4 points, I would like to ask you a question. But do not use Google in the meantime. Who did invent the greenhouse calculator? Anyone? Shell. That's a close one, yeah. It was the British petrol industry, also known as BP, who invented the gas calculator, and it has been criticized by some as a form of greenwashing because it promotes the idea that individual actions are the primary solution to the climate crisis, while ignoring the larger systemic changes that are needed to address the root causes of the crisis. So by just focusing on greenhouses, we are not focusing on the ecological, the economic, and the social challenge that we have. A focus on decarbonization alone may fail to address the underlying root causes of environmental degradation and injustice. For example, the transition to renewable energy may not address issues such as land grabs and resource extractions that have historically impacted indigenous communities. For example, we are using raw materials that we extract from the ecological part of West Papua in Indonesia, which is colonized, still colonized. So by using these new materials, we are helping the colonization to continue and to oppress people living over there. So what is intersectionality? Probably you heard of it. It's the analytical framework of intersectionality is known through Black feminist activism, but was already in use, but not naming as such, by Savitribai Phule, a political activist, educationalist, and poet in the Global South who lived in the 19th century. She played an important role in improving women's rights in India. Collin and Blitch, two feminist ethics scholars, argue that by giving credits to legal scholar Kimberly Crenshaw, probably you know the intersectional framework from Kimberly Crenshaw, for coining the framework, we neglect the historical and intricate reach of the practice of intersectionality. The framework shows how people are shaped and deprived by heterogeneous systems of power. Overlapping social injustice becomes visible by examining climate adaptation through an intersectional lens. Therefore, we should examine climate change not only as an ecological injustice, but also as an economic and social injustice. And moreover, intersectionality would, by taking not only the different intersection of identity, but also the complex layers of power, such as power and relationality, rejects the current global North and global South narrative that is misused in the climate debate to address inequality. Just using the term intersectionality does not necessarily make analysis intersectional. Global South assumes a geographical boundary dividing the countries from the northern and the southern hemisphere, but nothing is less true. It is another example where framing blinds us from the cultural insensitivity and the geographical inaccuracy of the term. For instance, Australia, a geographical global south country, is labeled as a global north. So the economical status of a country is what counts. We cannot deny the existence of a racial boundary here. Through the lens of powers and authority, intersectionality would also state that we cannot speak of a climate debate. A debate suggests that everyone involved has an equal say. The myth of equal opportunities, coined by Colin and Blinch in 2016, describes the unfair distribution of resources and unfair competition. The Global South may have a seat at the table, but they do not have an equal amount of resources to compete with the Global North. So again, in this debate, there is no equal say nor competition for nations from the Global South or underprivileged people living in the Global North. So to understand climate injustice is just not the narrative, the Global North and the Global South. We also have a Global North and a Global South here in the Netherlands, for instance. The United Nations Sustainable Development Goals, also known as the SDGs, exemplify how the world should be rescued and educated on how climate action should be organized, measured and formalized. These not binding goals are what we think is in the best interest of our well-being and an example on how the myth of equal opportunities is institutionalized. The voices of indigenous people, local communities and grassroots organizations have historically been ignored in the development of the sustainability policies, including the Sustainable Development Goals. And if you read research articles on climate activists from the Global South, you will understand more and better how this developed. One of the reasons is the power dynamics. Decision-making power in sustainable development policies is often concentrated in the hands of a few powerful actors, such as the government and the corporations, who have historically marginalized the voices of indigenous people, the local communities, and the grassroots organizations. But also the knowledge systems. Western knowledge systems have often been prioritized over the local knowledge system, which has led to the exclusion of indigenous people and the local perspective in sustainability policies. Many theories we see in the climate change field are based on indigenous knowledge. And then we also have the funding mechanisms. Funding for sustainable development policies often comes from international organizations and donors who may prioritize certain types of projects over others and may not have a deep understanding of the local context and the needs. So to address these issues, it's important to create spaces and mechanisms for the voices of indigenous people, the local communities and the grassroots organizations to be heard and for their knowledge and perspectives to be incorporated into sustainability policies. This can involve creating participatory processes for policy development, ensuring equitable representations in decision-making bodies, and providing funding and support for community-led initiatives. The SDGs do include a focus on local community engagement and participation in achieving the goals, but more needs to be done to ensure that the voices of indigenous people and the grassroots organizations are heard and incorporated into policy development and decision-making at all levels. This can involve greater attention to issues of power and representations, as well as committed to centering local knowledge and perspectives in sustainable development policies. So you need the intersectional lens to understand why power is a mechanism in it all. Colonialism and imperialism have a significant impact on the environment and the natural resources in colonized countries, such as land use changes. Colonial powers often impose their own land use practices on colonized territories, which often involved clearing lands for agriculture, forestry, or mining. This resulted in the deforestation, soil degradations, and loss of biodiversity. It also leads to resource extraction. Colonial powers exploited natural resources such as minerals, timber, and fossil fuels for their own economic gain. This often involved extracting resources in an unsustainable way, leading to environmental damage and pollutions. And we also see the infrastructure development. The colonial powers built infrastructure such as railways, roads, and ports to facilitate the extraction of export of resources. And this often involved disrupting ecosystem and natural habitats, as well as displacing indigenous people and local communities. And the introduction of invasive species. Colonial powers often introduced non-native species to colonized territories for agricultural or for agricultural purposes. These species had often a negative impact on the local ecosystem and causing ecological imbalances. So all these activities contribute to greenhouse gas emissions, which are the major cause of climate change. And then we have the renewable energy transition, which I mentioned before. It has the potential to be a positive force for decolonizations and justice, but only if it's done in a way that prioritizes the needs and the rights of local communities and challenges existing power structures and dynamics and distributes benefits in an equitable way. Otherwise, it can perpetuate and reinforce colonial power structures and dynamics, such as neocolonialism, land grabs, and the inequitable distribution of benefits. The benefits of renewable energy projects are not always distributed equally and may in some cases reinforce existing power imbalances. For example, if you look at the gentrification process, if you are in the break at the restaurant, you will see Amsterdam North, the other side of the river, and you will see how gentrification is going on. But next to gentrification, we also see the sustainable transition going on. And what we see is that access to green is only for those who can afford the more expensive houses. We also see that parks make place for new housing, and the people who need green the most are those who belong to the lower socioeconomic class. So instead of contributing to their health, it will make their health worse. So we do not have any numbers on how the sustainable transition deepens the current injustice, but there are some ideas that it could lead to. And then it also could lead to reinforcing existing power structures. The transition to renewable energy may not necessarily challenge existing power structures and relationships, and may even reinforce them. For example, if renewable energy projects are owned and controlled by the same actors who control the fossil fuel industry, the underlying power dynamics may remain unchanged, like Shell, who is currently working on their green strategy and trying to use renewable energies, who are also need fossil fuels to be produced. And also getting a $1 billion subsidy from the European Union. So the impact on the climate injustice on marginalized groups. Marginalized communities, including indigenous people and people of color, are disproportionately affected by climate change due to the historical and ongoing systemic inequities. Decolonizing the climate debate means recognizing and addressing these inequities and ensuring that climate solutions are just and equitable for all. The climate crisis affects people differently depending on their race, ethnicity, and socio-economic status, such as access to resources, displacement, health impacts, and the economic impacts. Climate change can have significant economic impacts, such as loss of livelihoods and increased costs associated with adapting to changing conditions. Centering justice and equity in all aspects of the climate debate requires a fundamental shift in the way we approach the issue. This means moving away from a market-based and individualistic approaches and towards systemic change, community-led solutions, and a focus on historical and ongoing injustice. There are several ways that justice and equity can be centered in all aspects of the climate debate. You can, for instance, listen and prioritize the voices of the marginalized communities. This involves stepping aside and creating a space for the perspectives and experiences of indigenous people, people of color, and other marginalized groups, to be heard and incorporated into policy development and decision-making processes. So we see that there is some space for policy development, but when it comes to the decision-making process, the framework is already there and you have to fit in, and there's always someone who makes the last decisions. And also prioritizing systemic change over individual action. While individual actions such as reducing personal carbon footprints are important, they should not be the primary focus of the climate debate. Instead, the focus should be on systemic change, such as shifting away from fossil fuel-based economies and addressing the root causes of inequality and injustice. It also needs addressing the historical and ongoing injustice. The climate crisis is not just a result of a natural phenomena, but also a historical and ongoing systemic injustice such as colonialism, racism, and economic exploitation. Addressing these injustices and their impact on marginalized communities should be a central part of the climate debate. And of course, we need to ensure access to the resources, such as clean energy, water, healthcare. It should be a fundamental part of the climate debate. The jazz music industry has the potential to challenge dominant narratives and center justice and equity for marginalized communities in the transition to a low-carbon economy through, for instance, amplifying marginalized voices. Jazz has a history of centering the perspectives and experiences of marginalized communities, particularly the Black communities. Continuing to do so can ensure that these voices are considered in the discussion around a low-carbon economy. The jazz industry is also able to address systemic issues. Jazz has a history of addressing systemic issues like racism and inequality. Doing so can help the transition to a low-carbon economy where the root causes of environmental injustice are addressed. It could also help to model alternative approaches. The tradition of experimentation and improvisation can be a model for alternative approaches to complex changes. We have to deal with a wicked problem. There is no one size fits all. And collaborating with local communities. Jazz has a history of collaborating with local communities, especially through live performances. This can ensure the transition to a low-carbon economy prioritized community. Activism has been intertwined with jazz music since its inception. Jazz musicians such as Nina Simone have used their music as a platform to challenge social and political norms and advocate for justice and equality. Jazz music has been used as a tool for social and political activism, for instance, by changing the narrative, protest music and art. Jazz musicians have created protest songs and anthems that have become a part of the civil rights movement and the social justice movements, expressing frustrations, anger, and hope for change. It could give space for the emotions that comes along with the climate change, such as ecological grief. And also, what is needed is that it's also an industry where there is not always the guarantee of a fair pay or a fair share. So address those systemic issues that leads to equity and equal payment for all the jazz musicians. The unfair distributions of resources and therefore the unfair competition, also known as the myth of equal opportunities to compete, makes it evident that we cannot label the current climate adaptation strategy and talks as a debate. Intersectionality rejects the current global north versus the global south narrative, misused in the climate debate to address inequality. Colonialism is still vivid through the climate debate. The term post-colonial could suggest that the colonization ended. But we must not forget that there are still nations and nearly 2 million people suffering from occupation and colonizations. Numbers from the United Nations in 2021. such as the people of Papua, the colonized Palestinian authorities, Kashmir, Western Sahara, and even former Dutch colonies such as the Antilles, the United States, Australia, Canada, and many more. Indigenous land has been taken and institutionalized. The renewable energy transition is not as innocent as it looks. It contributes to a colonization by extracting raw materials such as cobalt from Congo used to power our electric cars, or the Uyghurs who are imprisoned and forced to labor while producing our solar panels. So we need the social, the ecological, and economic lens to look at climate injustice. As the resources and powers are unequally divided, we should discuss climate injustice instead of climate change. We should first decolonize the debate and apply reparations to level the playing field, and from that point on, it is considered ethical to proceed with the climate debate. Jazz musicians have used and can use their music and a platform to raise awareness about social and political issues in various ways. Collaborating with activists to bring attention to these issues and to drive social and political change for a better future for many generations to come. So let's challenge the status quo. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Hanane Abaydi. Just one more big applause. Let's challenge the status quo. So much food for thought. So we're not having a climate dialogue here today, but a climate debate. Next up are Pierre Dugelet, director from Le Périscope, and Gwendolenn Sharp. She's the founder of The Green Room. And they are here to tell us a little bit more about the impact and also the importance of the European Collaborative Project and why it's so important to come together and talk about the issues that are at stake. Please give it up.
Hello, everyone. Thank you. Sorry for the lights. I'm Pierre, so this is Gwendolenn. We are happy to be able to present more ground story. Happy to present the result of the carbon study we did during our Footprints project. Our main objective with this study was to show a typology of carbon footprints to allow the jazz concert venue and festival to start working and reducing concretely their carbon footprints without the need to calculate everything. We have been working with 4 venues and 5 festivals that are very different. They are their location being in the center, the city center of the big city like the Bimhuis or Périscope, but also in the countryside, far away from every public transportation, like l'Estran in France, same for the festivals. Also, various of dimension. We have big venue like the Bimhuis, as you can see, and small ones like my small venue or small venue, Le Périscope. But also festivals like Oslo Jazz Festival or Jazz Door. So many size and type of festival and venues. Working with such different examples allowed us to draw a general typology of carbon footprints and gave us the results you can currently see on the slide. There's a lot of info that we have done from that study. And if you want to know more, we have the leaflet at the entrance, or we have the study on the web. And you are obviously more than welcome to come, take that, read it, and ask questions or details if you want. But what we can take from what we are looking at this slide is that the main carbon emissions are made by the audience coming to the concert, more than 45% for the concert venue and almost 75% for the festivals in our study. The main topic that we should be working on is audience travel, and it's really important to always keep it in mind. Second, to that come the artistic travel. With 20% for the venues and 18% for the festival, this is the topic on which the Footprints project worked specifically. The energy was also a big impact for the venue, but with a big diversity depending on the site of the venue and the kind of energy used. What we can draw from these numbers are big work waiting for us, and transport and travel, focusing first on the audience, but also changing the way the artist would travel.
So as Pierre mentioned, this study really demonstrates the value of observation in setting up coherent strategies for the music sector. But still the work of collecting data and refining data must be continued, especially to better understand also the risks that we are facing as a music sector. Venues, festivals, producers can all act collectively on the mobility of artists, but on the other hand, their means of action remain quite limited when it comes to the mobility of audiences, the most important emission source as it has been shown. Venues and festivals can, for example, conduct audience surveys to better understand the mobility of their public. The same way they can conduct energy audits to better understand their consumptions, but a lot of responsibility also lies with local authorities and public policies who must act in this direction to support the decarbonization of our sector. So many resources are available on the subject, and especially since the last years, but we also know that resources and financial incentives are not enough. If we take some of the recent studies that have been made also on another experiment project, which was the Hypotenuse Houses financial scheme, which is now Culture Moves Europe, it showed that despite the implementation of financial incentives for green travel, over 75% of the mobility conducted through this scheme all over the Creative Europe countries were done by plane. This is one of many examples that show how professionals from the music sector need to be trained and to be fully supported in their transitions through tailor-made capacity building programs.
To go further than just the study, in the Footprints project, we wanted to experiment the recommendations that we made following up the study. We did 12 tours. We are doing 12 tours, not finished, but in our 6 countries, partner countries, France, Poland, Netherlands, Austria, Slovenia, and Norway, with the aim of making the most sustainable tours possible. Today we can take some results from these tours, some success when we managed to make more concerts in the smaller area, working more on the social and aspect and inclusivity program of the tours and duplicating the good practices. And strong difficulties that we will not overcome concerning time management, availabilities of artists, agents and venues, and possibilities to add some concert or programming that is finished a year in advance. These are some of the success and difficulties that we faced. And we will take more time to dissect and complete this map in the year to come, but we had the incredible opportunity to try in real life our recommendation and to face the reality of the live music sector.
This is one of the big strengths of European project, that they provide what we can call a great playground for experimentation, for testing new models, different models. The 2 years of the Footprint project and the experience also with Jazz Connective before that has shown the importance and the need for further research. There are no tailor-made solutions, actually, when it comes up to the ecological transition of the music sector, and we are all learning on the way, discovering new obstacles, I would say almost every day, but also achieving some small victories. Business as usual cannot remain in force, and this implies a new policy agenda. Mobility, which is at the heart of the Footprint project and now Better Life project, needs to experience a major shift that is turning from a quick and frequent travel mode feeding on fossil fuels to an altered mobility concept grounded in sustainable dynamics rather than growth expectations. As shown by the first results of the Footprints project, this shift highlights the importance of collaboration and collective solutions, a scale for trust, and a framework which increases the importance of local communities and considers all aspects of the existing ecosystem. Contextualization is key in terms of infrastructures, access to funding, historical trajectories, career development, and so on, and needs to be integrated into fair, participatory, resilient, and environmental-centric designs and instruments. So this was a short introduction, but this is actually our plan for the coming 2 days to discuss this further. And on this note, Pierre and I, and in the name of all the Footprints and Better Life partners, we wish you a fruitful conference.
Thank you.
So then we have now arrived at our dialogue part. We have invited 3 inspiring leaders from the field, and I would like to first of all invite Marguerite Courtel. She's the co-founder of Les Augures, to join me here on stage. Please give her a warm welcome. And next up is Parvinder Marwaha. She's design program manager at the British Council. Please, a warm applause for Parvinder. And last but definitely not least, Garance Amieux from Périscope, who can tell us more about the Footprint project. Please give it up. Thank you so much for joining me, the 3 of you. So the big question we have today that we will try to answer is how the music sector can respond to climate change. Well, you've all been doing that for a while now, but well, you can't solve climate change in 3 years, so we need to move forward. And I'm really looking forward to hearing about what you've learned and what you're thinking about for the future. But before we dive into the context of everything, I thought it would be good to also introduce you a little bit. So I've asked you all to bring an image or a photo. Marguerite, let's start off with the first image. Can you tell us what we're looking at?
So, hello everyone, hello everybody. I'm Marguerite, I'm representing a collective called Les Augures. It can be translated in English as the augur or the omen. So this is an old painting from the 18th century where you can see those priests watching birds and predicting signs on the future. I am not pretending that we can predict the future, but the idea is more to help a cultural organization to mitigate, to adapt themselves on all the ecological transformation and help them to innovate. So we have we are 4, and we have 2 axes. We have a charity part where we try to gather cultural organization on a subject of transformation. One of the subjects is circular economy, and the other one is digital sobriety. And we have another axis, which is a collective, and we are building up strategies and CSR vision for cultural organization.
Mm-hmm. When did you start with Les Augures? So what was your incentive? Because as we've heard also in the keynote, there are so many different reasons and ways in which you can go about your activism or your need for change. What was it for you? Because you're the co-founder, you're not the only one. What was it that you decided we should start a collaborative action?
So yeah, we started to talk just before the pandemic. Before, sustainable development was more like a topic. So the four of us more come from the visual arts sector. So I'm not really coming from musical sector, but we do work right now for theater and cultural venue of art vivant. And we started to talk together before pandemic, and we were like, okay, we need now to talk about environmental and sustainable practices, and it should not be only a topic of exhibition or concert, it has to be in the practice as well. And then pandemia arrived. It's the name of a new play, and it arrives, and you all know what happened. Culture was not judged as essential, and we had this demand from an artist called Xavier Veillant. He was like, okay, now we have all our projects are frozen, so let's take a step back and maybe try to look at the way we are working. So we started with him, this is kind of a big artist working with a bunch of assistants, and he's making big scale projects. And we start to see with all the team what kind of material you are using, how you transport your artwork, how you move, and this is how we started to organize the four of us. And then after, little by little, this is where the cultural sectors realize how weak they were facing all those crises.
Yeah, so you moved away from climate change just being a topic to realizing that it's very necessary for change to happen.
Exactly.
Yeah, thank you. Parvinder, let's move on to you. Let's move on also to the next photo that we have. When it comes to climate change, there are different factors that are often named, so globalization or internationalization. They are often named as two key factors. What is your view on that, and can you also elaborate a little bit about what we're looking at?
Yes, thank you. Hi, everyone. So I'm Parvinder, and I guess to describe a bit about what I do, I would say that I work in cultural and kind of climate advocacy and programming, and I look at themes that I think are really relevant in the global conversation. Themes like, and Hasna mentioned them and Hanane earlier, systems of race, systems of gender, systems of faith as well, and how they relate intersectionally with climate change, because I do believe that if we don't look at the intersections, then we're missing something in this conversation, because these groups are worst affected by climate change, which will lead me on to this image. What I do in my day job at the British Council, to give you a bit of context, is I design programs of how the UK can connect with the regions Europe and South Asia. And those programs support collaboration. So how can we actually collaborate? But my main interest and the thing that I try and look at is ethics of representation. How do we actually ethically collaborate? How do we ethically come up with solutions, and how do we represent people? We don't represent them, actually. I represent myself, you guys represent yourselves, but how can we create better pathways that they can represent themselves? Because I think that is, again, something that we're missing, is this colonial, we talk about this word, a lot, this colonial narrative, is that we think that we speak on people's behalf. They have a voice, but it's just not English. Or, half of Global South is kind of more than half are illiterate, inverted commas, but they're just not literate in the English language maybe, or the written word, but we use oral traditions. So I guess to give you a bit about myself, but this image, I put it up because this is a program that I developed over the last 4 years called Gender Ecologies, which looks at the intersection of women and climate change, because women are the worst sufferers of climate change and the biggest group of climate migrants. You can research this further in your time, look at UN Women reports. I won't go into detail. This was a program where we brought these 2 artisans who are from Pakistan, in rural Pakistan, in communities, and 25 students from Bangladesh and Pakistan to the center of London, King's Cross. And they built climate responsive structures. So they built a shelter, and this is a cooker. This is an award-winning cooker that you see in front of them, because the things to, what you need in a climate disaster in the end is you need to know how to build back if you survive, and this is the reality, if you survive, you need to know how to, access to food and water is fundamental or you don't live. You need a shelter and you need a toilet. They are the basic things you need. So this image is questionable. We brought artisans, like I live in those questions and perceptions. So we brought these artisans from rural Pakistan. They cannot speak English. They came to the UK. Actually, one can speak Urdu and I can speak some of that, even though that's not even my primary dialect. Again, dialects can transfer. One speaks a tribal indigenous language. Other things I can tell you about it are, women die from carbon monoxide poisoning with cookers often, which is why this was designed to kind of for the safety and dignity of women in the climate conversation. It's not just about survival, it's about how do they survive with dignity? Do you know what I mean? Like, why should they be treated unequal to us? The materials are low tech, none of this high tech that we've got around us, that's not going to help us survive. And then I guess I'll end on, because I've said a lot. Look, they missed their family, actually, these guys. They were like, oh, we love it. And they asked to come. I didn't just, bring them. It was the stakeholders in Pakistan that said, we would like to share our knowledge because we know more about this to the UK. But they missed, it was raining. We really got hit by the weather. We were like, oh my gosh, it's cold, it's raining, British weather. But they went home and it was 45 degrees in rural Pakistan and they were like, we missed the weather. And I was shocked. And then finally, I guess another perception is, people were asking them so these 2 particularly, they became village millionaires. So they were below the poverty line. They learned how to build this cooker. They then showed other villagers how to make it. They made money from it. And now they've got cars, motorbikes, houses. And then when asked what they spend their money on, everybody was like, the education of your children, perception, want to send them overseas. And actually, if you zoom into their jewelry, they buy gold. They were literally just like, we put all our monies in kilos of gold and that's what we love. And people just wouldn't think this, it challenged my perceptions. I was also like, what are you doing with your money? And they're like, we built the houses. And then they started showing me the amount of gold.
Yeah.
So anyway.
Now, well, going back to what they've built, what I really like about this story is that it's about going back to the basics. And somehow we often have a view from here that we know how to change the world for the better and how we can combat climate change. Well, maybe climate change is here because we always thought we knew how to do things better, and maybe they know better.
I 100% think they know better, because I think, again, it was mentioned that these old knowledge systems, they know how to grow their own food. In a crisis, they're gonna survive better than us. That's what I genuinely believe. If you were really in a climate crisis.
During COVID, I learned how to bake bread. Who more learned how to bake bread during COVID? Yeah, I want to see hands. Yeah, you see, there are more people that when in a crisis, when you're at a standstill, you're forced to just go back to those basics. Yeah. Thank you so much for sharing this. Garance, I want to move on to your work. You work for Le Périscope and you've been involved with the Footprints project. So the Footprints project has been filled with a lot of different activities as well. It's the tours, but it's also people coming together. What activity was the one that you remember most and why?
So hello everyone. You can see on the picture, so it's the gathering of people that was the most important for me. I think the main goal of Footprints was to try things out. So by studies, by experimentation, by trying stuff together. Mm-hmm. And we did 2 weeks of what we called Spring Campus. As you can see, it was not spring. But
you can't really know anymore.
Yeah, right. But the first one was in summer, so it's kind of a spring campus, you know, it's a balance. And we've met with agents, some of them are here. We've met with mentors, we've met with some artists, with experts that come from all over Europe. And the fact that we put all these people together during a week of learning, of intense learning of each other also, because the learning process goes also by informal talking and partying, because it's part of what we do. Mm-hmm. And you know, just sharing together our difficulties, what we've managed to do so far, and what we are trying to do was, I think, the main part of the Footprints project. What came out of it, at least.
Yeah, nice.
So it's the second time.
Yeah.
That picture.
When you went into that Footprints project, what was your big ambition or your biggest ambition? Like, were you already looking for quota or for numbers? Because everybody knows we love numbers.
Definitely, yeah. No, I think the objectives is always the same. It's like how to make a tour sustainable, but like generally. So it's really large, and it allowed us to go to different ways of seeing the sustainable touring. Mm-hmm. And the idea was to make music sustainable. So that's a big ambition. Mm-hmm. And when we went into it, we really followed where we were learning the most and where we could go the most. It all came from discussions from the previous project, so we had an idea, but it's not a specific result that we expected. We didn't expect quota, we didn't expect to have a real number, but more like to try and see what's going on afterwards.
Yeah, nice. We spoke a little bit about how COVID and how coming to a standstill can enforce change. Marguerite, it's also your experience, as you told us, that after COVID hit, all of a sudden it became a necessity for different organizations to take this topic seriously and not just as a topic. How do you think we can hold on to that necessity? So, well, COVID is still among us, but not in the same way as it was. Sometimes I'm afraid that we're just going to hang around and wait until the next crisis hits us, and then all of a sudden we're at the new standstill and we realize, oh wait, we need change. And those are the big, impactful moments. But we've already learned so much. How can we hold on to those necessities?
I think we have no choice. It started with COVID, and after we had this problem with the materials, where we had like a lack of materials, so all those production job had trouble with that, and the price were rising. And then it was energy crisis. We are like facing it right now. So we are deeply into those crises. We have to deal with it. And some organizations are already like taking a step, slowing up, slowing down. So I feel that it's really on every symposium today, every like cultural moment, cultural events. They are trying to organize like a roundtable. It's on the topic. I really hope it will continue to be on the table in order to prepare themselves. It's really about adapting ourselves, preparing ourselves.
Yeah.
I feel that for a long time, culture had this impression of cultural exception, you know. If big industries are not changing, why should we change? But culture realized how dependent they were on other industries, and those industries are currently changing. So it's just also following up all the actors that are now doing the transformation, the redirection. So I really...
But with also the keynote in mind, when Hanane also said that we as individuals, I'm gonna not really quote you, but almost, we as individuals cannot take on all of the change. How can we make sure that there's systemic change? Because that is what it's basically all about in the end. It's good that it's on the tables and that there are tables that people are talking about, and that all those cultural organizations take it seriously. But then how can we move forward to making it systemic? Do you have any ideas about that?
I mean, of course, it's a systemic change, and everybody has a key role into that. Policies, cultural organization, public, artists, in the narrative they can bring, in the practice they can change. You have to put everyone on the table, and you cannot say to culture it's an exception, even if, of course, we want in the future to still have the possibility to listen to music, to go in venues and watching movies, and this is why culture has to prepare.
Yeah, and Garance, when we look then at the music field specifically, who are all those different actors that we need at the table?
I think everyone needs to be at the table. First off, we most of the time we talk about the artist at the center, but I think we have to take off some weight off their shoulder, because it's important that they have a voice. They can voice the problems, and they can show it to a lot of people, but they cannot take all the responsibility about for example, for us, we were working on touring. They don't choose where they tour. They can ask, they can try, but it's not their main job. The main job would be of the venues, the festivals, of the producers, of the bookers, of all this ecosystem, and that's what we've been trying to do, to put everyone sitting down at the same table and talking about how we can work together to do something more sustainable. And we've managed to do a lot of different results that was interesting, but what is lacking right now is public policies. When we talk about audience moving, we talk about public transportation, and public transportation is not up to the venues or to the festivals. It's up to the politics that can say, okay, I'm gonna work on that. So I think the role of the artist would be to speak up and share what they learn, their difficulties, what they want to share. The whole ecosystem need to sit down, and and we need to be supported. So it's really everyone need to be on the table and talking.
Yeah, but it's already so difficult to just be an artist.
Yeah.
I mean, and then you also need to take up that. Parvinder, how do you listen to this whole idea of change? What do you believe? Should it be more top-down or bottom-up?
Yeah, it's so interesting. Also, going back to what you said, I couldn't help but think it depends where you are in the world, all of this conversation. Because actually, if you're an artist in the other side of the world, you don't even have, like, I genuinely feel, if I'm really honest, in Europe and the UK, etc., that are we in a crisis? Like, we're not in a crisis. Would you say that you feel like an urgency? Like, really? Do you feel like, because we're not in a survival mode that they are in the global south. So here we can even have these conversations, which I think is a luxury, amazing that we can discuss this, but we're we're in this weird limbo of climate preparedness. We're preparing, you know, but what are the arts and culture sector preparing for? Like, because the climate crisis, if we're like looking at that, is quite a physical, site-specific kind of thing. And again, what you said about governments and actors, I find that really interesting, because actually governments in the global south do not want to look at marginalized communities who are the majority. They're in the rural millions. 90% of these places are below the poverty line, live in rural, marginalized communities, and governments do not often look at how they would better the lives of those people. So we, you know, it really depends. Like here, we do a protest, we sign letters for our mayors, and everyone's, you know, there's an app going around saying, you know, sign this petition for your mayor and, like, you know, put climate on the agenda. That's great. So there, they are trying to WhatsApp pin to be like, I've got a flood, I'm flooded in this location. And what I feel is that we live in a prototype society. Like, we have the ability here to, like, test. Let's test this new technology for something. Let's, like, test this out. Let's experiment and pilot. But I'm honestly telling you, in the global south, like, if that chula that I showed you, the cooker, that wouldn't have been taken down there. It's the real thing. So they don't test and prototype. They just build, and that's their life. So I guess for me, it's to always, I'm not saying that we can always look at that, but I am saying that I think we can be more aware of it. Do you know what I mean? So we're not so luxurious in our kind of, like, because that's colonialism in the end, power dynamics.
Yeah.
You know?
Yeah, but you didn't answer my question.
Which is what? I'm just saying.
When
Top down.
I understand that we're talking about the situation here where we're kind of in a limbo and we're not taking into account the entire globe. And I really hate doing it, but I'm going to do it anyway. When we're just focused on the here and the now, and thinking about this change that we feel, this urgency that there change needs to happen, what kind of way do you think can move us forward fastest? Because sometimes I think, come on, we just need to start going.
I guess move us forward into what? Like being more aware or closer to the climate crisis? Because no one wants to, right? So in which way, I guess?
In the way that change happens, because the way that we are living our lives now, it means that within 10 years, we won't be in limbo. It will hit us.
Yeah, so
reducing the carbon footprint, for instance.
So I find footprints really interesting. I'll just say that I guess the biggest thing that I genuinely believe you can change in your life, that's going to make a huge difference, is the food and water, how you consume food and water. That's what I really think. Anything related to that, because that's where the biggest footprint actually lies, in my opinion, just globally. So to zoom into, like, the music sector, it's really hard because, you know, we talked about this. Did you know that before the carbon footprint, there's a water footprint? So we are so consumed by footprints, but the Netherlands, the UK, and France are some of the countries with the highest virtual water footprint, which means that we take water from other countries because we take their food, we take their energy and things like that. So for me, I can't help but think from such a zoomed out thing, being like, okay, that's where I think you can change things within the festivals and what you do, like on the level of that.
Yeah, and you already said, for instance, about the audiences, that you need more public transport, and that's something that is not in your hands or the venue's hands, so you need policy for that. What are the other things that can be done to change those footprints, be it carbon footprints or water footprints?
I think it's for me, but we talked about it already, but it's more about the transportation. And I think the problem with audience transportation is that we always want to go further. We always want to go on the other side of the world, and we always want to visit something different that is far away, or see an artist that goes to one concert in France, it's in Paris, so I have to take the train, and then that's not sustainable, and that's not going to happen like bit by bit. Only the richer people will, even in our countries and even in our lucky, in a way, countries, because, as you said, we're in a limbo. But we cannot keep doing that. So the main idea would be to make the artist move more and to go closer to the audience, and in the same time reducing their travel also. So meaning that you will go to France for a tour in France, and you will stay longer in each place. You're going to have to work on different stuff, not just the music, but also your social impact, where you go. It goes by inclusivity program. It can go through a lot of different stuff. And I think that if you move just one band instead of the hundreds of people, then you will necessarily just reduce and make stuff smaller, simpler, and so in a way better.
Yeah. But to do so, you need all these different actors. So you need the venues, for instance. You need policymakers. How do you get everybody on one page? Because I can also imagine that someone who is just programming a festival at a venue or working for a venue thinks, well, okay, it's Thursday, and on Thursday we play jazz. So if you want to come on Wednesday, yes, sorry. That's not the.
It's a real problem that we are facing right now. So that's not like there is no solution, that perfect solution right now on how to do that. But
are the venues interested even in changing it all?
As Marguerite said, it's great, but the artistic fees are going up because everything is more expensive. The travel fees are going up. There is a lot of awareness that comes from audience, because we kind of forget that they have a power. And if your audience tell you, I'm not going to see that artist because it took the plane, and I'm boycotting the plane, so I'm not going to see that artist, then you're faced with all that problems, and you have to take it into account. So a lot of people are trying on their own to go there, and the ones that don't are going to be at some point, and I think it's going to be really soon, faced with all these problems.
Yeah, you're nodding, Parvinder.
No, I'm just, because I understand like there are a lot of kind of circumstances that you're kind of, but the focus on travel is interesting for me, because I guess this industry does require travel quite a lot. And I ask myself the question, okay, is that the hardest thing to tackle, you know?
I wonder, what does the audience think? Is tackling travel the hardest thing? So who thinks tackling it is the hardest thing? Can you raise your hands?
Who's going to decide that? The production? The whole cycle?
Yeah, so that's a good point, because it's not just the artists. We have to look more holistically to productions, because some people bring a stage manager, others bring, I don't know, maybe you have a family and you don't want to be separated from your family for a longer time. So that whole cycle of travel is bigger than just the one artist or the band. It's so much bigger. Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, I remember when we were talking about travel, and it was mentioned about the carbon footprint, that the audience create a lot of the footprint. But then, and we were talking about incentivizing, and we were talking about...
Well, for instance, here in the Netherlands, we have a festival which is called Into the Great Wide Open, and they had this tax on their tickets, so that if I, as an audience, would go there, I would have to pay extra, and if I could show that I came by public transport, you get your money back, which I think is a great idea to incentivize the audience. But the other question that lies beneath it is it actually up to the audience to do that? And who do you include, who do you exclude? But why aren't there other ways than incentivizing them?
Well, I think we're like sadly becoming more of an individualistic like society in a lot of ways than more community based, and I think that's a huge problem, because if you have to incentivize people to think like a group of 20 people, 20 friends going to a festival to pay the carbon tax rather than think how can we car share, how can we go together in a coach, how can we lessen that ourselves, because that's more systemic change that we were talking about, where someone thinks about it for themselves, then I've got, like, it's time-based, isn't it? I've got 5 minutes, I need to get there in an hour, I'll take my own car, blah, 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 blah. These things are all, I think, how we think right now.
Yeah. How do you think about this?
Yeah, I think it's always about public policies, and it's about territory, it's about sharing, and definitely about this losing idea of individual and thinking more like like public policies, like how we can together define, make public transportation late open more late, or how we can share like this artists coming in this region and how we can like do a tour and stay longer. So I really feel that public policy has a key role to play. Because it's really about strategies, it's about global overview, it's about also difficult decision to make, renouncing. I feel that nowadays it's more like different organizations who are experimenting some stuff, such as like part of the Footprints project. You have Aeronef, you have lots of different venues that are started to calculate, renouncing, slowing down, but still there is this idea of values. It's maybe a bit blur, but it's about like thinking collectively and public policy.
Yeah, we need a more collective way, a bigger collective approach to this. I want to go to the audience. I'm gonna see where the microphone is and if there are any questions or additions from the audience. I cannot believe that you have been sitting here for an hour or an hour and a half and you don't have anything to add or any questions. So I'm gonna just stand here until someone raises their hands. Thanks.
Yes, it does. Hello.
Hi.
I was just wondering, I'm working for a French NGO that is working on this ecological question among the performing art sectors. And I was wondering if, on this question of eco-responsibility, if we shouldn't see the thing as changing a whole system. I mean, when we talk about the responsibility of the artists, today it's difficult for an artist to go on longer tours because it takes them away from their family, from their personal lives for a long time. But it's very recent that it is that way. I think if we think of Shakespeare or Molière, they were going for years on smaller areas. And it's really new that artists are able to go do international tours in such small period of times, and at the same time you are telling about the fact that maybe you can't take so much time to go and see your favorite artist in concerts, and this is also something to think about, the space we have for our hobbies in our life and the space we have for our jobs in general, and the time we have to work to have enough money then to pay our hobbies. So I was wondering, and I feel like there is a more general question to tackle at this point. It's not only when we say it's about the responsibility of the artist. Okay. This is just what I wanted to say. It's about, and this is why it's something we have to. It's very politics, as Marguerite said, because it's something very bigger than us and bigger than the music sector, but still has to be tackled at this point, I believe.
Mm-hmm. Thank you. There's someone else.
If I can add, because I had similar things that I was seeing. I do believe that transport is a big problem with emissions. But
Could you say your name? Because
I'm sorry, I'm Rob vanwege Eurosonic naar de Slag Showcase Festival in Groningen. We also struggle with, because we're a European Showcase Festival, we get people from all over Europe to us, so transport is a problem for us as well. But it's a more internal conflict of seeing that transport is a symptom of our extended touring and everything we're doing. So I believe that the root of the problem lies far more in that we accept that this luxury and privilege that we have to go touring everywhere, we see as the new standard. So at that point I agree, like if we look at the roots of the problem, that is where their biggest energy lies to change, because otherwise we just keep on fighting the symptoms and we will never get the job truly done.
you had more things to say, right? Or was that it? 'Cause
This was the main one.
okay, thank you.
Hi, this is Colleen from the Periscope also. I'd say about the tackling only the travel issue, that it should be one of the major concern is how will we get used the audience from wherever it's from. We get them used again to experiment and discover, like music or whatsoever artistic performances. For instance, in France, there's a lot of landscapes that are, I don't know, there's not enough concert, not enough propositions. So even if we achieve to make the artists go to these places, there's the politics, but also a real big social issue to just make the people actually go to the concert. And it goes with the possibility, and it's close to what she said, that what's left after you have the job, after you have the major fees of your life, how you get available to actually discover something that you don't know for music matters. These days, most of the people, they actually just pay a lot to go to festivals, which is bad, obviously for the climate and also for just how you consume what you see, what you hear as concerts. Like, okay, if you spend 50 euros to 1 gig a year because it's like something you really know for sure that you will like, you should probably better spend the same 50 euros in 5 concerts of smaller groups that maybe you don't know. But I think these days we have some major analysis and progressive, I don't know how to say. We have to make this possible for all the audiences.
Yeah.
But that's not actually our issue, I think so.
Whose issue is it then?
Well, I'd say politics, but it's a global social problem.
Yeah.
So
we've also spoken a little bit about the venues, and that the venues are in place and that they can change things up. And I jokingly said, well, we don't play jazz on Wednesdays. But sometimes they are also just faced with, for instance, funding issues in which they need to diversify the things that they are showcasing. So if they don't do it, then they lose their fundings, and there goes the entire chain of being able to play at a venue, right?
Yeah, the funding problem is a big part of the problem, because at least in France, that's where I know the most, so I talk about that. We have rights, about cultural rights, the same as education or as health rights. You have the right to have access to culture. So that's why we had so much funding of culture, because it's important and everyone should be able to go there, to go to concerts, to go to movies, and so the prices are really low. But to keep these prices low, we had to have funding so we can pay the artists, we can pay everything, because we are not outside of the world, and we have to pay for the food, we have to pay for the energy, for the buildings, for everything, like anyone else. So we are in this mixed stuff, but it's been a few years that we've taken the politics down, and now it's all about the project. So you have to do more projects to be able to have the same number of people working And so you have like the UW project, you have the same number of people, and you have to keep doing the concert you were doing, but also working on other stuff. And you're always overwhelmed of doing more and doing more. And I think the whole discussion we are having right now, it's always about slowing down, but as a society, not as a cultural side, not as the music industry, but as society, meaning you work less, maybe. You have more time to go and enjoy concerts, and maybe the artists spend more time on one place and they don't go and do a huge international tour. They go bit by bit and taking it slower. And if everyone would slow down, I think we would be able to make a more sustainable industry.
So could I just say capitalism just screwed us all over?
Big time.
Are there any more questions from the audience? There's one. Can someone please hand over the...
Hello, this is Lucy from
Where?
in Nantes, right over there.
Ah, there. Hi.
Hello. I had a question, maybe a philosophical and not really optimistic one, but we all agree on the fact that at the end of the day, this is about politics. But at least in democratic areas of the world, we are the one electing the politics. So do you really think we'll be able to impose ourselves some rules before it's too late and there is no gas, no oil?
So who should we ask to answer? The both of them are looking at you, Parvinder.
Okay, well, I'm going to give the complicated answer then, but thanks for your question. I think it's really interesting because we consider ourselves to be, democratic, and we're in a system, but our democracy is linked to everyone else's democracy in a way, like politics is global. We think about it as local, but decisions made. I mean, I work for an organization that is at arm's length to the government, and the way we fund arts and culture programming is through government money that's international aid money. And the two things that you need to look at in that, and this is in the UK's democratic system, right, or let's say political system, is you need to support women and girls, and you need to support knowledge and skills exchange when you look at those streams of money and things like that. And do I feel like it's such a complex question, because if I won't feel the same as other people, because I am a British Indian person, so I feel very much, and I do think it's philosophical, I think it's emotional and social. I feel deeply engaged with countries in the global south like India, where my parents have migrated from. I feel a connection to them. So I can't think within my own democracy, even as a UK citizen. And I think these are the things that we have to realize, that if you are of dual identities and other things, it's not as simple as saying, like, I will vote for the Green Party or Labour, or I will vote for this in sustainability and climate, because if you feel the effects or the connection with other places, really, for me, it depends on your relativity or your connection and your responsibility to that as well, because then it just doesn't become simple. And I don't have an answer. That's thank you for looking at me, but I'm not the one.
Do you maybe want to add?
When for me, policies, it's also about like a city policy. There is this program really interesting called C40. It's a program where they are looking at different policies that have been implemented in different cities in terms of sustainable development, and they see what have been working in some countries, in some city, and what can be implemented in some other. And I feel that when we talk about democracy and policy, it can be in your city. And I feel more like a citizen. I live in Paris, and I feel that in my city, I can make a change. And this is the first step. Of course, right now it's with our president in France, it's sometimes difficult to believe in your power as a citizen. But I think in your city, you already can make a change.
Same goes here for the Netherlands, I think.
Yeah, Amsterdam is super inspiring in terms of policy.
I have to say, like in a thing to us that in a way democracy does work in some ways, in the sense the last 5 years, I think we'll all agree, not just because of the pandemic, but a lot has changed. There is no arts and culture organization without sustainability managers and looking at climate change or diversity and inclusion. You know, like it's become more embedded in our frameworks, and that I think in the long term will lead to something, we hope. You know, because we can't avoid it now, and it's
maybe that's the change.
Huh?
That's the change, the quick change I'm looking for.
That's the one.
But also, I think we have to look at what we've done so far. I mean, if you look just at women's rights, I mean, 100 years ago you had absolutely no right, and look at what we're all doing today. Obviously, we are still fighting, and that's why we have a day of fighting for our rights and everything, but still the change is like radical from what we come from. And I think if enough people get together, then we can have a radical change on other stuff.
But
And
do you really believe that the change was radical? It took so much effort to get that change.
yeah, and we can do more, and we should do more, and we should be more involved. And I think that's why we have to do that kind of project, and that we have to do project that goes on different countries, because it's also depending on which country you are, you don't have the same rights, and you don't have the same political power as a citizen, or as a worker, as whatever you are. And I think that's why these projects are important. It's because it allows us to get together and to have more power to actually make a radical change.
Thank you.
Hopefully.
I'm going to look at the audience again.
I don't know if does it work?
No.
I have a question, a bit linked to what you were saying.
Who are you first?
I'm from Ghent in Belgium. I run a music venue, Handelsbeurs. But there is this. A lot of us are concert organizing and organizers, venues or festivals, and we reach out to a great number of audiences. And there is this saying which is, art cannot change society, people can change society, and art can change people. So it's about, we can change our organizations to become more sustainable, but the bigger effort would be to change the audience which we reach. And that's my question. How do you think we can amplify our narrative towards the audience to make that change? It might also implicitly change the audience going to concerts in different ways than using non-sustainable transport, for example.
Beautiful question.
May I say something about that? It's connecting very much.
Where are we? There. Hi. First of all, I would like them to answer, and then we can go back to you.
Yeah, because it's connected.
Yeah. Go on.
I would say art has a huge, genuinely from experience, art is an amazing instrument for storytelling and bringing audiences in. You're actually right to identify that, like where science, and I've worked with scientists as well who calculate this data that we're all obsessed with, but they find it hard to communicate that to an audience and the public and large communities, whereas music, architecture, design, food, all these things are amazing gateways to translate that. And I'll give you a very quick example to like show you. I talked about water footprint. That is more tangible than carbon footprint anyway, right? Because you can drink water, you understand it. It's our living kind of thing. But I was working on a project where they took a menu of a restaurant and through communication design translated that into water footprint. So you went and chose your food based on the water footprint rather than the price of the food and things like that. And it connected people to the concept of water footprint. And now, you know, people will never think the same. And so in your music venue, if you think of very creative ways, also just one other point about music is that in loads and loads of cultures and communities, music is used as a form of expression about climate and things like that as well, spoken word, poetry and music. So actually, that's amazing. Like you could also put on performances that actually speak to climate and sustainability, not a performance that's about jazz, but again, look at intersectional things like a lot of these communities do that. They literally, the power of music, I think, is strong. And I'm not even from that background, but I understand it because my heritage is, we do, like, you know, songs for everything, you know, like Bollywood culture.
Yeah, thank you. I would like to see what you wanted to add.
I would like to connect with the former talker. I'm a bass player. I've played a lot in BIM. And just 1 week ago was Dave Holland was here performing. Let's say that we make a jump in future. I'm a visual artist too. We know hologram, we know internet, we know Zoom. We couldn't think about the Zoom expansion in the corona time. We know that hundreds, thousands of people looked at Emmett Cohen in his continuous jazz performing on internet. How would we think about creating a new connection between the hologram, internet, to bring the trio of Dave Holland here live by technology? So, because people, and that is connection with this guy, people want to gather, to be together in an event.
Yeah.
And they can make instant playing in the United States, and in a flash, they will sit there.
Then we're going to be looking at the carbon footprint of technology.
I was just
well,
super
that is
high.
one of the possibilities.
Yeah, but
that we can join.
But that's not the, like, we know that.
It's not the same,
that
yeah.
the
It's not the same.
No, that's not what I meant.
It's not the same, but it's at least something.
Yeah, but I think...
Let her finish, I wonder...
I think we tend to have well, there's something called, like, triangle of inaction, like, of not acting. And one of for the sustainability and for changing, actually, there is a triangle of why you're not acting. You can put that on politicals. You can say, okay, it's the politics, so I cannot do that on my own. And one of the part of it is like, okay, but that's okay, because we're going to have technology in the future that will allow us to lower our carbon footprints. But as you said, like, really well, where does that technology come from? Oh, Hanane talked about that also. It comes from all the resources that we are taking from other countries that are already suffering a lot from climate change and taking it so for our pleasure. So maybe the answer to that would be, why not taking other, it's just an idea, but like other artists, you know, to play the same music, and that they had been taught, for example, by this band, and they come back here and they play. And this way, it's Jérôme Bell in France, who's a really famous choreographer. That is doing that. You know, he's teaching other people on other country to do that, and so he doesn't have to travel, and the other person is actually benefiting from it, and you can also give power to people in other countries. I think that's a way smarter decision than taking technology on.
Yeah, that's amazing.
Yeah.
Maaike, maybe you want to react.
Yeah, I want to react.
Your hand out. Me too, but you go first.
All right. Well, if we're talking about this...
Maaike, could you introduce yourself?
Yeah, sorry, I'm Maaike. I'm the director of this Bimhuis. Which is well, anyway, talking about this international music art form that jazz is, hearing people from all over the world with all these different voices and all these different perspectives on life, hearing them play live, I think that is so important. That's a value that we cannot ignore. And for many, many people in the world, meeting live music from all over the world is a light in darkness.
I think you've mentioned a really good point that I think someone else did, that we look so much. What we lack is like other forms of literacy, like emotional and social and what that means. And because we devalue it so much in our cultures, it's gold, you know, it's everything. It's like empathy, emotional literacy, but we don't value it. So we value footprints or like more physical, tangible footprints. That's what I mean, because I do believe that we've got the intangible things that are important. And I agree, actually, the emotional quality of those things is so important.
Yeah, and also just adding on, during COVID, everybody was in these Zoom meetings 24/7. I don't do them anymore. Do you still go into Zoom? Yeah, well, you're working
every
with
day.
all European partners. But I do believe that in the beginning it was very convenient, but with time it just became annoying. I'd rather see someone and talk to them face to face, as we are doing right here, because you get
especially for cultural experiences.
Yeah.
Even if we know that streaming is a big income for music industries, and this is a subject. We still know that it's so important for public to gather in a concert, in a venue, to talk to each other, to share an emotion.
Yeah.
Yeah, and then we have to take this value in account in this discussion.
Yeah.
You cannot throw art away because it's so important that we don't feel lonely, we feel heard, we feel connected with parts of the world that otherwise we wouldn't be connected to. So, yeah.
Yeah, thank you.
How do you say? We have to provide that value of art.
We're gonna have 3 more questions. Up there first, and then it's your turn, and then it's your turn, and then we're gonna round it up.
Hi, thank you for the inspiring presentation and discussion. My name is Joachim, and I'm from the Conservatorium here in Amsterdam. And sometimes the vision that our students have is my sense that when you are successful, yes, you play at stages all over the world, and you are traveling the world, and you do that 100 times a year or 200 times. How do you think about redefining what is success in music?
Wow. This is a great subject. Actually, Solveig, I don't know if she's still there. Yeah, she did an interview a few days ago about this, the values. We should decarbonize the values of success for culture, and maybe it's always about value. Maybe seeing less stuff, but with better quality. When you are living in a big country, in a big city, you have like this bulimia of culture. You have so many stuff. You have this FOMO effect of missing stuff, and yeah, totally redefining the values, considering maybe use of water, carbon, or just change.
Yeah, I think also we are really in a creative sector, and we are completely stuck in reinventing the way we work, the way we have success, or the way we share music. It's a really weird stuff that we are stuck in a way, and we cannot move from that way. Yet we are called the creative sector. So maybe it's time to create again a new way of thinking, a new way of working, and sharing, and all that values.
But then, just to add one more thing in it, we already spoke about funding, and often to get funding, which is necessary to be able to often also to live off of your craft, of your work, the funds are the ones who define what success is, or whatever it is you need to do to be able to get that.
I don't know. I think it's nice that you mentioned young people, because I guess I mean, they're the people that will start new systems or ways and things like that. And in a way, I think it's when you said that, I thought the same around value. Just to go to the value thing, sorry, because it stuck in my head, is that you should get them to collaborate and revalue, like as in see the value of music systems and the value of that is very different here as it is overseas. And I really believe in the power of collaboration. So like the more collaborative they are, the more they co-design together, the more they don't put it on an individualistic thing that I travel, I will tour, to have a sense of a deeper connection with other things, I think they'll revalue. So I think you should set a cool creative brief for them to like totally challenge that perception. Like you're the people who essentially hold them in that space. Like anyone who teaches, I think you guys should think of that creative brief having an element in them that completely shifts their perception, because they're the people that are going to take this forward. Like we can talk about it, but really, yeah, I think you could. So let us know when you do when you put a creative brief on them.
Thank you.
Hello, my name's Alexandra. I come from Poland, but currently I live in Amsterdam. I just want to make a few comments to what was discussed here, because we discuss a lot the environment, sustainability from the environmental perspective. But I think also looking at this beautiful graphics that about decentralization of events, we could also talk about the sustainability of jazz itself, right? Because again, you studied it with big events. There's a big problem of carbon footprint, but someone else mentioned there that, let's say if we had a lot of events, maybe they wouldn't have an audience. So perhaps some answers could be like more education and definitely funding. But the idea of having the decentralized events, I think is wonderful. Just how we can make it happen. Maybe this is the big question. Yeah, I guess the big events from other genres, they could just make more events and make them smaller, and then people don't have to travel perhaps so far. But yeah, with jazz, I think we need to also think of sustainability of the genre itself, not just the environment. Yeah, that's.
Yeah, I think the social impact is really important. When you spend more time on one place, on a territory, you will touch people that you were not able to touch when you're just touring and going to a place for just a concert. So giving the space for the artists to expand their stay and meet other people, meet people that don't come to them, but them coming to other people is one of the solutions.
And
I guess
then we can ensure they have opportunities, right, to perform and practice as well. And then this can like keep on living, because I think right now it's a big struggle. Like I know some jazz musicians, and I know it's very difficult sometimes just to ensure they can have an opportunity to perform. Not Dave Holland, but a lot of other fantastic artists that maybe not many people even heard about.
Yeah, thank you. And then we have a final question over there.
Thank you. I'm Aurel, and I'm a drummer. I studied at the conservatory here. I finished like almost 2 years ago. And it's not really a question. It would be more of a testify. Just to say that I personally am ready to go on tour by bike all around Europe and spend a month if needed. And I'm not like saying this because I'm interested in, like it's not an interested remark. It's honestly, please, I just would like to do that because I don't sleep at night at the idea of taking a plane. And I have several projects that are, it's hard to make them take off, you know. So I'm applying to competitions, forcing myself to apply to foreign competitions, telling myself if we're selected, then we take a plane, stuff like that. But yeah, just this testify, I'm ready to bike all around Europe. I know other artists who have done that. For instance, in France, you guys may know Camille have done, the singer, I think she's done that. Tour by bike. I know also a festival in, I think it's in the Pyrenees or in the Alps, and the musicians are hiking their way through venues, things like this. I would love to participate in such an initiative. So just so you know, so there are guys and girls that are maybe girls. I don't know. I mean, I have the impression that I'm the only one, but I'm sure there are some other people who are ready to do that.
But would it be as a way of a statement, or because in the end it is not the sustainable solution, right?
It's not the sustainable solution. No, it's not.
No, it's not. And I think when you're there is a huge debate on like cycling for touring, and I think it's a wrong debate because it means that people that can't cycle, for example, what are we going to do with them? Like people that have that are in a wheelchair or have a mental health problem and cannot spend so much time like that, or as you mentioned earlier, also women that have I think it's Solveig, but like women that have a family and I cannot leave them for 3 months, and it's always like we are always thinking of solutions, but maybe we can take back to what the main problem is, and the main problem is that we have discrimination, we have difficulties, and all of that makes us force us to take the plane to go for just one concert, because it might be the opportunity of your life. If you don't go to do that concert, then you won't have your career, and we are forced to do that.
I think what you're maybe saying in some ways is, as an artist, you're willing to look at alternative ways of doing things.
Yeah, definitely. I don't want to impose that to everyone.
No. You're just saying cycling is one, but I guess venues and people. Look, I did a project once where the designer, it was for Milan Design Week, and she was selected, and it was great. I didn't think of it. Put my hands up. She was like, I don't want to fly. Can I go by train? It's going to take her longer. I was like, absolutely. And it was going to cost us more as an organization, by the way, because train travel costs a lot more to travel across Europe. But that was the responsibility that I took. But what I should have done, therefore next time, like this time around this year, what we've done is like say, we encourage you to travel by train if you want, but this is the extra length of time it's going to take. And, take the responsibility a bit to find and I don't believe in solutions, by the way, it's like alternatives. There are so many. So provide 5 options to artists, where they can actually choose. Mm-hmm. Because again, it could be cycling. I understand your point completely, because I think we need to diversify a little bit the ways, do the train, do the whatever, and then start having that language around this. You know what I mean? Like having the options.
Yeah. Make those options also just stick with everyone. So it's
just a bit natural.
It becomes,
like normal to be like, hey, do you have a cycle scheme? Yeah, sure.
Yeah. It's more, I'm more thinking about multiplicity of alternatives. As I'm not saying that biking all around the world to tour is the future, but it's part of it. Mm-hmm. It's potentially a part of it. Overall, I'm talking about biking, but there's sailboat, there's a train, like you said, like this the most realistic way, realistic alternative. I just wanted to say I'm ready.
I'm really looking forward to seeing you maybe next year, or at least hearing from you or reading about you in the news that you bike throughout Europe with your drums.
Venues have drum kits.
Yeah,
so I can
venues have drum kits, is what he's saying. Yeah, thank you so much. And can I thank the 3 of you so much for joining me here today? And everybody, please give them a big, big, big applause. Marguerite, Parvinder, Garance. Thank you. And just a quick word of goodbye before you all leave. So this part of the conference has come to an end, but we will continue at the Bimhuis Café, where you will be able to hear more about the next part of the Footprint project, which is the Better Life project, which you've already seen up here. Tomorrow we will be back here with a talk with drummer Sun Mi Hong, guitarist Damien Cluzel, and drummer Jim Black. And we will be discussing with them the impact of various crises on the creative process of musicians. But that's not all. I told you in the beginning of this evening that tonight we will be back here with a double concert by Amalia Umeda Quartet and the Thijs Semai Quintet. It will be at 8:30, so you can go out now, have a drink, have dinner, and come back here at 8:30. We can enjoy some music. My name is Hasna Maroudi. Thank you so much, and see you tonight or tomorrow.